Want to get fluent in a foreign language? Well, the bad news is this means learning thousands of words. The good news is in this video, I'll show you exactly how to learn all those words both quickly and efficiently. So what is this magical method I speak of? 3 words: immersion plus flashcards. First, you will use my Anywhere Immersion method to expose yourself to authentic, interesting content. Second, you will create personalized flashcards in an app called Anki using useful words, phrases, and structures you encounter while listening and reading. And third, you will reinforce all of these words in context with more immersion. So you'll watch more videos, read more books and articles, and practice communicating with speakers online. From there, it's just a matter of rinsing and repeating this 3-step process until you have internalized the high-frequency words you need to understand most of what you hear and read, and build the necessary fluency to have basic but flowing conversations. And that's it. Getting fluent isn't necessarily easy, but it really is that simple. Keep watching for step-by-step instructions on how to mine vocabulary from your immersion activities and systematically memorize it using the Anki app. What is Anki and why should you use it? Anki is a flashcard app available on both desktop and smartphones that uses spaced repetition algorithms to optimize your learning. Based on how easily you remember a given card, Anki then automatically schedules review sessions for optimal long-term retention. Less familiar cards are shown sooner and more often, while more familiar cards are pushed back and shown later and less often. I really like how the polyglot Gabriel Wyner sums up the benefits of spaced repetition in his book, Fluent Forever. Quote, "We found the end of forgetting. You learn a word today and then shelve it for a while. When it comes back, you'll try to recall it and then shelve it again, on and on until you couldn't possibly forget. While you're waiting for your old words to return, you can learn new words and send them off into the future, where you meet them again and work them into your long-term memory. At least until you can upload jujitsu directly into your brain, this is the most efficient way to memorize large amounts of information permanently." Now, there are many spaced repetition apps available today, and nearly all language learning apps integrate some kind of intelligent spacing. But Anki remains my go-to flashcard app for 3 main reasons. Number 1, it's highly customizable and can be adapted to your unique learning preferences and goals. Number 2, it's highly flexible and supports audio, images, example sentences, notes, fill-in-the-blank exercises, and more. And number 3, it keeps you focused on only the information that you're really struggling to remember, so you're not wasting time on stuff that you already know. Quick note on pricing before we go on. Anki is generally free for all the apps except one. And unfortunately, that's the one that I had to pay for as an iPhone user. Yep, the iOS app is actually $24.99, so one-time purchase, and then it's yours forever. It's free on all the other platforms, including macOS, Windows, Linux, and Android. Now, I think the app is well worth this price, and I'm more than happy to pay to support the development and updates for an app that I use. But I do still think it's a little unfair that only one platform has to pay to subsidize use for all the other platforms. The app's creator, Damien Elmsis, gives the following justification for this price discrepancy. Taken alone, Anki Mobile is expensive for an app. However, Anki Mobile is not a standalone app, but part of an ecosystem. And the $17.50 Apple gives me on each sale goes toward the development of that whole ecosystem. For the price, you get not only the app, but a powerful desktop application, a free online synchronization service, and mobile clients for various platforms. So again, I understand the rationale, but I really think it would be more fair if it was a freemium model where either everyone gets certain aspects for free and you pay to upgrade, or if he charged for both the iPhone and the Android version. How to get started with Anki. Here now are step-by-step tips to get Anki set up. Step 1, download the Anki app on your devices. You can download the Anki app at the official Anki website at apps.ankiweb.net. There you'll find links to download the version for iOS, Android, macOS, Windows, and Linux. Regardless of what platforms you use, I highly recommend getting both the desktop version and a mobile version. Personally, I prefer to use the macOS version for creating flashcards in batches a few times a week, and then I use the iOS version for daily language study. While you can create flashcards in the mobile version, there are a lot of features that you can only do in the desktop app, especially the ability to add audio to your cards using the TTS add-on, which I'll talk more about later. Step 2, create a new flashcard deck in Anki for each language you are learning. For those of you learning multiple languages, I highly recommend creating one dedicated deck for each language. Some language learners do like to create decks for specific topics, study sources, and so on, but I find this gets really complicated really fast. And based on my experience, I think it's best just to have one deck per per language. You can always add tags to keep things organized, which I'll talk about in a minute. You can also download pre-made decks that are created by members of the Anki community, but you're going to get the most benefit when you create your own decks from scratch. Such personalized flashcards will better fit your needs, and the very act of creating them actually will help you remember their content. Step 3. Create new flashcards. To add new flashcards to your deck, open up the desktop version of Anki. Then click on the Decks tab up at the top, and then select whichever deck you'd like to add cards to. Click Add at the top to create a new card, and then a pop-up window will appear where you can enter that flashcard's content. By default, you will see the basic note type, which has just two simple fields, one for the front of the card and one for the back. Instead of this, I highly recommend using custom fields and formatting, which I'll explain in just a moment. Before we go on, I need to highlight some important terminology distinctions used in Anki. I've been using the word flashcard here so far, but if I want to be technical about it, there's actually a difference in Anki between a note and a card. When you add a new expression to Anki, you're technically creating a new note, and each note can have multiple fields and pieces of information attached to it. Then, based on your settings, the content of this note is presented to you in various cards. So in other words, you create notes, but you study cards. Personally, I always use two card types to ensure a more active, well-rounded mastery of each word. So I use recognition cards, which include the target language on the front of the card, and then quiz me on its meaning, pronunciation, etc., all of which is on the back of the card. And also recall cards, which include the meaning of that target language word on the front and requires me to produce that word from memory. It's very useful to have both types of cards in your language learning routines because recognition and production are very different skills, and one doesn't automatically lead to the other. In general, production tends to be quite a bit harder since it's an active skill, and I therefore recommend practicing that more than, or at least as much as, the passive recognition cards. If you're studying Japanese, make sure to install the Japanese support add-on, which will automatically create both recognition and recall cards for you whenever you create a new note. And it also automatically adds furigana, little hiragana reading guides, above any kanji that are on your flashcards. As you go about your immersion activities each day, whether it's watching shows on Netflix, listening to podcasts, or reading manga, keep note of words and phrases that you find interesting or useful. Here are 5 tips for gathering and processing this vocabulary. Number 1, use a shared Google Doc with your online language tutor. If you work with a tutor online using a site like italki, there will probably be many times during your session that you don't know how to say something and you see a hole in your vocabulary, they suggest a word or phrase, and you want to later memorize that. You can, of course, try to write this down or have them put it in the chat, but it can be tough to jot things down when you're desperately trying just to keep up with the conversation. And even if they put it in the chat for you, it's very easy to lose track of these once you end the session. So instead, I recommend using a shared Google Doc with a new dated section for each session. Then as you go through the conversation, they can add in any vocabulary or structures that come up that you then later can take and put into Anki. Number 2, take physical notes when appropriate. As author Greg McKeown puts it in his book, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, the faintest pencil is better than the strongest memory. Though a Google Doc is great for long-term storage and instant collaboration, I find that good old-fashioned pen and paper is actually ideal for capture in many situations. This is especially true in social gatherings, dinners, etc., where pulling out a phone at the table might be considered rude. In such situations, you can then quickly jot down any interesting words or phrases that come up in your little pocket journal, and then later add it to Anki. You may assume that you're going to remember interesting phrases that come up, but trust me, they will very likely vanish from memory long before you get back to your computer. Number 3, export from other apps. Many language apps, mobile dictionaries, and browser extensions include ways to quickly save vocabulary as you study. And some even include dedicated Anki export options. Here are a few of my favorite apps, dictionaries, and browser extensions. The Language Reactor extension for Chrome allows you to instantly save any words that you encounter in both Netflix and YouTube. And if you get a Language Reactor Pro membership, they give you the option to export any of these words straight to Anki. Dictionary apps like Nihongo, Pleco, and Spanish Dict include built-in flashcards, so you actually don't even have to use Anki if you don't want to. But personally, I think it's best to export them from those apps, import into Anki, and then study everything in one place. For example, in the Nihongo app, you can tap the little info icon next to any of your flashcard decks, tap the share icon in the upper right, and then select export deck. This file can then be imported into Anki. In Duolingo, you can use the sentence export feature to save an image version of the sentence, including its English translation. After you complete any exercise in Duolingo, tap the up arrow icon on, and then select Save Image to send it to your photos. Number 4, take screenshots. Screenshots are a quick and easy way to capture any words, phrases, or sentences you encounter while immersing in your target language on your devices. Here are instructions on how to take screenshots on all the major platforms. On your iPhone, press the side button and the volume up button at the same time, and that'll save a screenshot to your photos. On Android devices, press and hold the power and volume down buttons at the same time. On Mac OS, simultaneously hold down the Command key, Shift key, and the number 3, and this will take a screenshot of your entire screen. If you want to capture just a part of your screen, hold down Command, Shift, and 4 instead, and then you can drag the capture window wherever you like. Mac also has a built-in screenshot app, which you can use if you want more options than this. On Windows, hold down the Alt and Print screen keys at the same time. Or you can use the free snipping tool on Windows 10 and above, which provides more capture options. Now, unfortunately, you cannot actually take any screenshots when you're watching streaming services like Netflix. You're just going to get a blank black screen. So in those cases, your best bet is actually to take a photo of your screen using your phone. And number 5, batch process your saved vocabulary. So gathering all this vocabulary is great, but you need to actually do something with it to memorize it efficiently. So here are some tips for processing your notes and images on a regular basis. First, decide how often are you going to process all of this each week. I suggest at least once a week so things don't build up too much, but daily tends to be best to avoid overwhelm. Next, create a repeating task or calendar event to remind you to do this at whatever set interval you just decided. Make sure to add subtasks or a checklist for all the different types of media or locations that you need to process. I recommend using the checklist feature in either Apple Notes or in Notion. Tips for creating effective Anki flashcards. Setting up Anki can take a little work up front, but it's definitely worth the effort to get things right in the beginning. Here are some tips to help you create effective Anki flashcards. Number 1, use custom fields. As I mentioned earlier, the default note type in Anki only includes 2 fields: front and back. Whatever you include in the front field will be shown on the front of the card, and whatever you put in the back field will be shown on the back of the card, or this will be reversed for recognition cards. Now, this is fine to get started, but I highly recommend using custom fields and formatting to increase your effectiveness and make your study sessions a bit more enjoyable. For example, in languages like Japanese and Mandarin Chinese, it's very helpful to have multiple fields on the back of a card so you can isolate variables like characters, pronunciation, etc. Here are the exact fields I recommend and those that I use myself for my Japanese and Chinese flashcards. First, an expression field, which shows how a word is written in normal text. So for Japanese, it would be in a mixture of kanji, hiragana, and katakana, depending on the word or sentence. An image field for attaching a photo when relevant. More on this in a minute. A pronunciation field, which shows you exactly how the word or phrase is pronounced using pinyin, romaji, kana, IPA, etc. An audio field, which includes a recording of the audio or auto-generated text-to-speech. A bit more about that in a moment. A meaning field, which includes a definition and any alternate meanings of the word. An example field that includes one or more phrases or sentences to show how that word is used in context. And a note field, which includes any useful rules, exceptions, reminders, or mnemonics. So here's how to create custom fields in Anki. First, open Anki on your desktop. Click Browse at the top. Select the desired note type on the left. Click Fields. Click Add, enter the name of the custom field, and click OK. Repeat this process as many times as necessary to add all the custom fields that you want. Then drag these fields into your desired order, or click the Reposition button and enter a position number for each field. Click Save, click Sync, and then when prompted, click Upload to Anki Web. Then open the mobile app and click Sync again to download from Anki Web. Number 2, use custom formatting. In addition to creating custom fields, I also recommend doing a bit of custom styling so that you can make certain fields stand out with unique fonts, sizes, and colors. For example, here's the exact code that I use from my Japanese flashcards. If you want to copy and paste it, you can find this code in the blog post linked in the description below. Number 3, add audio. Hearing the pronunciation of words in your Anki decks will help you develop better pronunciation and beef up your listening skills. You can manually attach audio recordings for each and every card, but that takes a lot of time. So instead, I recommend using the add-on called HyperTTS. This tool automatically adds audio using text-to-speech technology, hence the name TTS. Now, like Anki itself, HyperTTS takes a little bit of work to get set up properly, but trust me, it's worth it. And I link to step-by-step instructions in the description below. Now, note that HyperTTS is the improved successor to Awesome TTS, which is a previous add-on from the same developer. Both are still available, but HyperTTS is easier to set up and has more functionality. To install the HyperTTS add-on, open Anki on your computer, not your mobile device. Export your Anki collection, just in case something goes wrong when you're installing HyperTTS. So simply go to File and then Export. Click on Tools in the menu bar, select Add-ons, or just type Shift-Command-A on a Mac. Click the Get Add-ons button, and then type in the following code: 111623432. Once you restart the app, click on Tools and select HyperTTS Services Configuration. Click Enable All Free Services and then save. If you want, you can upgrade to HyperTTS Pro to get some of the premium text-to-speech services, but in my experiences, the free services are pretty decent for most languages. Next, choose whether you want to use collection audio or real-time audio. Both have pros and cons. If you choose collection audio, all of the audio is generated ahead of time for your entire deck and then stored in your collection. The upside is you don't have to worry about having a Wi-Fi or cell signal when you're studying your flashcards to hear the audio. The voice will also be the same on all your devices. The downside is that it'll be a much bigger file and it's more difficult to update later. Now, as the name implies, real-time audio generates text-to-speech audio in real time as you go through your flashcards. The upside is that this keeps the file really small because there's no audio files to sync. But the downside is that you always have to have an internet connection when using your flashcards if you want to hear the audio. Also, the audio with real time will sound different on your computer or your smartphone, depending on what your local text-to-speech settings are on each device. You can find links to step-by-step instructions on setting up both types of audio in the description below. Number 4. Use images. Adding images to your Anki deck has many advantages. It creates a useful visual context for the word. It creates a direct connection between meaning and sound without having to rely on translation. And it can significantly improve encoding and recall. So for example, let's say you want to learn the Japanese word for cat, or neko. Instead of putting the English word cat on the front and then having the translation on the back, you could instead just put a picture of a cat on the front. And better yet, instead of just some random feline, choose your favorite cat or a cat from childhood that you have fond memories of. Such visual and emotional connections helps your brain remember new words much more effectively. So where should you find these images? First, I suggest just checking your photo library. That ensures that these images will be personally relevant to you. Another alternative is to look for photos using Google Images, which will give you various free options online. If you're a paid ChatGPT user, you could try using DALL-E to create custom AI-generated images. If you want to use icons, check out the Noun Project, or you can browse for free photos on Unsplash. Once you find an image you're looking for, here's how to add it to Anki. Open up a flashcard in the Anki desktop app. Click inside of a field where you want to add the image. Again, I use a dedicated custom field called Image. Click the paperclip icon at the top and navigate to your file on your computer, and then save your card. Number 5, create context with examples. A lot of people just put a single word and then a translation on their Anki cards. I think this is a big mistake. Instead, I recommend adding at least a phrase or a sentence to show you how this word is used in real conversations. This not only improves your comprehension, but it also helps you recall and then utilize the word when you communicate. When possible, try to use an actual phrase or sentence that you encountered while immersing yourself. But you can also find useful examples at tatoeba.org. Incidentally, tatoeba is a Japanese word that means for example. Once you find a phrase or a sentence, add it to the back of your Anki note using a custom field called example. Personally, I like to use a relatively smaller font for the example to keep things tidy, especially if I have multiple example phrases and sentences. For example, for the cat card that we just talked about, you could have the following Japanese examples on the back. Neko ga nezumi o tsukamaeta, which means the cat caught a mouse. And also neko ni koban, which is the Japanese equivalent of casting pearls before swine, but literally means coins to a cat. Number 6, keep cards focused on one variable. When I first started using Anki many years ago, I made the mistake of putting complete sentences on the front instead of in the example custom field on the back like I just talked about. While such context is good, the problem with this approach is that it didn't isolate one variable at a time. So there were often cards that had multiple new words that I didn't know, which made the cards overwhelming and difficult to self-assess. So instead, I recommend keeping one single new word as the focus of each card. This makes the cards much more useful, less overwhelming, and a lot easier to grade. But make sure you do still include an example sentence on the back so you can see how it's used in context. Alternatively, you can use what are called Cloze deletion cards, which ask you to fill in a missing piece of information. Such fill-in-the-blank exercises give you the advantage of being able to use complete sentences while still keeping them focused on one variable. For more about creating Cloze cards in Anki, see the link in the description. Number 7, use tags to organize your cards. Tags are a great way to organize your cards without having to use multiple decks. It also makes it easier to find a specific topic you want to practice. So you can tag your cards with whatever you want, but I find that useful tags include parts of speech, such as verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and nouns, topics and professional domains like business, education, and law, and where you first encountered that word, such as tutoring, Netflix, a specific show like Money Heist, an app like Duolingo, and so on. To add one or more tags, simply click the tags field at the bottom of a card, type a new tag, and hit the enter key, or if you already have tags, start typing a tag you want, and then select it from the pop-up. When you're done adding tags, click Add to save the card. Anki study and review tips. Anki's power lies in its spaced repetition algorithm, which automatically schedules reviews based on how well you know each card. If used correctly, spaced repetition flashcards are hands down the most efficient way to get lots of new words into your head quickly. But Anki can quickly become overwhelming if you fall behind and too many reviews start to pile up. Here are some tips to prevent this from happening. Number 1, be consistent. Try to review your due cards every single day so they don't pile up and get out of hand. If you do happen to fall behind, I recommend just resetting the reviews and starting over. Consistency also helps you learn more efficiently and increase long-term retention. Number 2, don't cram. Anki is designed to spread out learning over time. Trust the algorithm and avoid the temptation to review tons of extra cards in one sitting. Number 3, use the mobile app for study. Though the desktop version of Anki is ideal for creating cards, the mobile version makes it much easier to fit in study sessions throughout your day. Number 4, delete flashcards liberally. Don't be afraid to delete any flashcards you find annoying, frustrating, or boring. If Anki starts becoming a boring chore instead of a helpful ally, this is usually a good sign that it's time to start deleting some cards. And number 5, leverage habit stacking. Pair your Anki reviews with another entrenched habit that you already do every day without thinking. For example, brewing coffee every morning or every time you go to the bathroom. See this video for more about habit stacking and other ways to free up more time for language learning. I'll be honest, Anki can be a bit of a pain in the butt sometimes to get working properly, but if used right, it can be one of the most versatile language learning tools available. Until we can just download new languages like in the Matrix, spaced repetition flashcards remain the most efficient way to learn lots of new words in a short amount of time. By creating your own custom flashcards, you enhance your learning experience and can more easily retain new information. But remember, make sure to add images, audio, and example sentences, to review consistently, and to trust the spaced repetition process. But also remember that Anki should be used in concert with immersion. Though good flashcards can speed your path to fluency, they are not a replacement for the contextual exposure and communicative practice that you need to master a new language. Try to see immersion and Anki as a virtuous, intertwined cycle. You encounter new words while immersing. Then you memorize them using personalized flashcards. And then you encounter them again in context, which helps you remember them even better and helps you understand what you're watching and listening to. All right, happy immersing and happy studying.